who is a tool of Wall Street. So Wall Street doesn't really care who you vote for. Now, people say, well, what can we do? What can we do? There are at least a half dozen alternative parties, and I hate that. Look at that, alternative parties. There are other parties, and they are running candidates, and they are on the ballots in all 50 states. And so I would say, if you want to really do something, vote for somebody other than those two. Vote for the Libertarian Party. Vote for the Reform Party. Vote for the Natural Law Party. Hey, I don't care. Vote for the Socialist Party. Anybody. Just vote for somebody other than the secret society candidates. And before we went to the break, let me finish the one thought there. When Trotsky was being held in Nova Scotia, it was Colonel House, the alter ego of Woodrow Wilson, who issued him a passport in the name of the President of the United States and sent him on to Russia, where he helped found communism. So throughout the whole 20th century, there has been this incredible balance of power between the East and the West, between capitalism and communism, and yet the capitalists are the ones who created communism and founded them and funded them. Averell Harriman, one of the chief architects of the Council on Foreign Relations, was an integral part of Russia and funding Russia, and was our ambassador to Russia all through World War II. It's just an amazing story. It's just amazing once you really take a look and see what's going on.
Reminiscent of many of the gunfighters of the Old West, who also conveniently happened to serve as the sheriffs.
Yeah, right.
When they weren't robbing or gambling for a living, we're enforcing the law.
Well, you know, Ian, it's really funny because a lot of, especially us older folks who grew up there with all the westerns on TV and stuff, one of the common plots was that the rustlers, the bad guys who were running the poor old farmers off their land, secretly were being financed and ordered about by the kindly old banker, who actually would buy up all this land because he knew the railroad was coming through and he's going to profit off of it. We know these old plots, and yet we can't seem to extrapolate that into what's really happening to us today.
Shirley is in Fresno and joining us Coast to Coast AM. Shirley, you're talking with Jim Mars. Shirley? I can hear you breathing. Shirley?
This is Coast to Coast AM on the Premier Radio Networks.
Can you hear me?
There you go. You're talking with Jim Mars.
Hi, Jim.
Howdy.
This is kind of off the subject that you're on now, but I was going back to the pyramids and the Sphinx and the age of it. And do you know anything about what Edgar Casey said about that there being under the right part of the Sphinx, about our whole history, actually how it really is?
Yes, actually I do. In fact, there's two things. Number one, ground-penetrating radar has actually established that there is a room under one of the paws of the Sphinx. And then on top of that, some of the military-trained remote viewers have taken a look at that and said there's a room down there full of jars and vases that have scrolls in them, which may actually give us some very first-hand information about really where we come from and what was really going on. What I don't understand is that the Egyptian authorities, who many of them who have been trained and backed by our own CIA and the U.S. government, why don't they run in there and dig that up and find out what it all is? But they won't do that.
It could be that they're afraid of what could be there, what the world would find out?
I think you're absolutely right. And what we would find out is probably some of the secrets that these secret society peoples who are seeking to run our lives, they don't want us to know this stuff. They want to keep us barefoot and ignorant.
And thank you, Shirley. It's Marilyn in Mississippi hanging on for Jim Mars, Rule by Secrecy. Marilyn? Hi. Marilyn, you're talking with Jim Mars.
Yes, I have a question for you, too, Ian, and I have one for Jim and a couple of comments if I have time. I read a lot of this stuff since about 20 years ago, mostly of what you said, Jim. Did you get a lot of your stuff from Holy Blood, Holy Grail, and do you know anything about the present-day descendant, Plantard, I think, of the Merovingians? And I'd just like to say that things are never as they seem, and it's a diabolical plot of Satan to make us believe these things. And for you, Ian, would we equal time for us Christians, please? could you get J.R. Church? He writes Guardians of the Grail. Are you familiar with that too, Jim? And I can call him and have him get in touch with you if you'll give me a number or something.
All right. Well, Marilyn, if you hang on a second, we can get that number from you. And go ahead. Jim, you wanted to respond?
Yeah, I just want to say that, yes, I'm familiar with all of that, and it's these are all pieces of the puzzle. Holy Blood, Holy Grail is one of about 300 books that I used as a source for my book, Rule on Secrecy, and so. Yes, I am aware of all this, and yes, there's a lot of confusion here, and I want to say this right out front. I don't claim to have a lock on truth for anybody, and I'm not trying to say, listen to me, I know everything. I'm just saying, if you have an interest in these areas, if you'd like to know what's really going on, if you'd like to have some kind of hint as to what our true origins are, then look at the information in Rule by Secrecy and consider it, and then see if you come to the same understanding I have. Also, if I could take a half second here, Ian, we haven't mentioned this, but I am just so absolutely impressed by the cover on Rule by Secrecy. It's a dark black
it's
cover.
Totally cool.
Yeah, with orange lettering and with what seems to be a big strip of black duct tape strapped all around it. You know, this is secret. You can't get in this. And I just want to take this opportunity to publicly thank the designers. I noticed it's a David J. High and a Ralph C. Del Pazzo of High Design in New York City. And I've never met those fellows, but I'd like to take this opportunity to just tell them what a great job they did in designing this book jacket.
My kids, in fact, I've been carrying it around with me while I've been reading it, and I had it over at my son's second grade class, and all of the kids there thought the book really had duct tape on it. And
I know.
It's really, it looks that good that you think it does. Tell me real quickly about Holy Blood, Holy Grail. The premise of this being then that the Holy Grail is an actual artifact to be found?
Well, actually, the thrust of Holy Blood, Holy Grail, which is was published several years ago, basically begins to delve into the mysteries of the Priory of Sion.
Okay.
And
is that a Pinkett and
Prince?
Prince?
And of course, this is what I address in one section in Rule by Secrecy.
Is that Pinkett and Prince as well?
No, that's some authors. God, I can't think of.
That's
their
okay.
name
That's
right
fine.
now. It's Beignet and Lee and Lincoln.
That's fine. All right, terrific. We'll come back with a couple more. We'll try and get at least one or two more callers for you all, but we can't go without hearing the connection between what they found in the pocket of a friend of Lee Harvey Oswald and what we know about the assassination of Ronald Reagan, the attempt that was made on him by John Hinckley, and how the two could be related. It is part of what makes Rule by Secrecy so much fun. The new book by Jim Marrs, and you're going to be talking with him coming up next. My name's Ian Punnett on Coast to Coast.
All over the world, this is Coast to Coast AM on the Premier Radio Networks.
In our time that we have left with Jim Marrs, I think we'll get to two callers here, and then we'll close with one of the more interesting secrets in Rule by Secrecy. But first, Lori in Ventura with a question for Jim Marrs. Lori?
Hi there. Ian, I want to congratulate you. I'm so glad you're going to be on board.
Thank you. It's a lot of fun.
Oh, yeah. Jim, I think we need to bring out that another thing that they don't want us to know is the ordinary person, the spiritual power and potential that everybody has. It can be developed to the equal of anyone in the Black Lodges.
That's right. In fact, that's why they want to keep us ignorant, so that we don't understand what innate power we really have. One of the secrets that I'll spring right now, that I point out at the end of my book, Rule by Secrecy, one of the secrets we have, which is, number one, there are more of us than there are of them, and we are gaining knowledge every day.
I wanted to ask you, in your book, do you cover the White Lodges, the groups that are keeping for the people the knowledge of their spiritual power?
I am well aware of what you're talking about, and perhaps perhaps, unfortunately, I'm concentrating on who's really trying to rule everything, and I might should have. I really didn't have room to get into the people who are trying to counter that.
Well, then people can look at the works by Alice Bailey if they want to find out about the other side of it.
Until Jim writes a sequel.
Right.
Right. Well, there's a lot of material in the Alice Bailey works.
That's true. In fact, let me just say there's a lot of material, period, and I had to be, there was no way I could do anything but be selective with it.
And thank you, Lori, and thank you for the kind endorsement, too. I think we have time for Machiko in Los Angeles. Am I pronouncing that right?
Yes, that is right. I'm kind of nervous about it, but I would like to let you know that I was fascinated about the secret society called Freemasons. Richard Noon's May 5th, year 2000 book on page 38 says the word Mu is the origin of the name of Musons, that means the son of the Mu, the motherland. And this Mu means lost continent Mu. And in Japanese, Zen Mu means nothing, but the hidden meaning of Mu means enlightenment. And I thought it was very fascinating. And also, Jim, if you have a time, please investigate the ancient secret document called Takeuchi document, which tells all about the history of the universe as well as history of the Earth as well.
Thank you, Machiko.
It's a fascinating document.
I appreciate that. And
thank you. That's really interesting. I need to look into that. And for the listeners who have never heard of Mu, Mu is the Pacific equivalent of Atlantis. It was a legendary continent that existed and a land that existed before our recorded history.
You're right, and there is also another relationship as well, and that is that the Zen masters would frequently use, I believe, unless I've got this wrong, if I remember this from a theology class from a long time ago, that was also the one-word answer to to questions that could not be answered. That if they posed a question that defied enlightenment, they would just say Mu. And it was as though to say that this would have to be settled on another plane, but not here. But
right. Or as the caller pointed out, if Mu indeed means knowledge, then that means you need to gain more knowledge before you can understand about that.
Well, let's close out here with the most fascinating little turn in your book, and that's the connection between the assassination of John F. Kennedy and the assassination attempt on Ronald Reagan. And can you draw those two out for us here?
Yeah, I'll try to do that really quickly here. That is interesting, and of course that goes back to the first big national book I had, which was Crossfire, which dealt with the Kennedy assassination, and of course was a basis for Oliver Stone's film JFK. What Ian is referring to is that, of course, just a little more than 2 months after taking office, President Reagan was hit by an assassin's bullet, and except for about a quarter of an inch, would have put Bush into the White House 7 years before his time. Now, interestingly, the brother of the would-be assassin, John Hinckley, had scheduled dinner that very night with Bush's son, Neil Bush. And then Hinckley's father, oil man, and was a Texas oil man, and a very good friend of George Bush. And we find that Bush's name, including his little publicized nickname, Poppy, and I won't even go into what that might mean, along with his address and phone number, were in the personal notebook of oil geologist George de Mohrenschildt, the last known close friend to Lee Harvey Oswald. And so then, of course, we have a 1963 FBI report that says that a George Bush of the CIA was trying to find out about the reactions of the Cuban community to the JFK assassination. That even drew media attention in the 1992 election. And, of course, things like this, you just go, well, whoa, wait a minute. I mean, where does coincidence leave off and conspiracy begin?
Well, and just to finish up that thought in the 90 seconds we have left, that what also plays into that is the fact that that originally Ronald Reagan came out defiantly against the secret society group.
That's right. He pledged he would never allow George Bush, who was a member of the Council on Foreign Relations, to have a part in his administration. But he ran out and then appointed him vice president.
And then 2 months later, after they're elected, suddenly George Herbert Walker Bush is literally just fractions of an inch away from becoming president himself when the bullet of John Hinckley misses the heart of Ronald Reagan. Thank you, Jim Marrs, for all of your time. Enjoy your wonderful day that you have left in Hawaii, and I look forward to talking with you again in the future and getting caught up with you on the web as well.
Well, thank you. This was great. We'll have to do this again sometime.
I'd love to. And for everybody else that has been with us, if you've missed the announcement, Art Bell Sr. passed on earlier, 8 o'clock Tampa time. Art Bell Jr. and his family receive all of our condolences. And to him I say, God bless. And to all of you as well, Deus Te Amat. And we'll look forward to you next Sunday into Monday morning. My name's Ian Punnett on Coast to Coast AM.
To purchase cassette copies of this program, dial 1-800-917-4278.
Good to be with you.
Yeah, well, it's especially good to be with you tonight because I have in my hands a copy of Rule by Secrecy, which I have just finished a couple of days ago, and I think this is the best book on the secret government and the secrecy that governs our world that's ever been written, and I'm quite serious about that. This is an extraordinary breakthrough for you, Jim. I mean, you have really topped Crossfire this time, which I thought was a fabulously brilliant book.
Well, thank you, Ridley. I will say I really wished I could have gotten hold of this book about 25 years ago when I first began hearing about the Council on Foreign Relations and the Trilateral Commission. And, I was like a lot of the folks are today. I'm going, do those things really exist? Is that real? And yes, they do exist. Yes, they do exist.
Well, let's start working backwards from modern times, because there is some material in here so explosive about the Bush family. It has to be talked about, and we have to get to it first to be sure we do talk about it. Anne refers to the two candidates simply as Gore-Tex. She thinks of them as just one candidate. I mean, it's going to be a dart throwing contest this election, because I see these two candidates as basically the same guy in different suits.
Right, and but this points the way, and this points the finger to the secret societies, because going for the front runners, you can either vote for the Democrat, Al Gore, who is controlled by Wall Street and by the international financiers, or you can vote for the Republican, George W. Bush, who through his family is controlled by Wall Street and the international financiers. So see, Wall Street and the international financiers, they don't care who you vote for. They've got it either way.
Reminds me of Texas back in the old days when people walked into the voting booth and found Alan Shivers running for governor against himself as a Democrat and a Republican.
That's right.
Well, that's
in our
what we have now.
In our lifetime, more recently, if you remember, when Lyndon Johnson ran for the Senate as a very hard conservative Democrat, which today certainly would have been a Republican back in 1960, but then he also ran for vice president with John Kennedy as kind of a liberal Democrat.
Right, yeah, and he became more of a liberal when he was in the presidency in certain respects.
Well, that's because he came under the sway of the Council on Foreign Relations. In Rule by Secrecy, when we discussed the Vietnam War, we found that Vietnam was actually fomented years before we even heard about it. Back in 1951, the Council on Foreign Relations published a paper which basically advocated United States control over Southeast Asia. In 1954, just a few months after the fall of Dien Bien Phu and the French were forced to leave French Indochina, it was John Foster Dulles, Eisenhower's Secretary of State, who goes to the Philippines and creates CITO, the Southeast Asian Treaty Organization, which he himself said was simply a ploy to give the United States president the legal precedent and the legal excuse for intervention in Southeast Asia. And John Foster Dulles was a founder of this Council on Foreign Relations. These people have been, setting up these major world events for the past few centuries.
And here we sit in a situation where there are people in power who have a very special relationship to warfare and a belief in it that's quite different from yours and mine, because, of course, their kids are never involved.
Absolutely. And, you know, Whitley, it even comes down to modern events. We had the incredible psychological warfare photograph showing a helmeted machine gun-toting trooper pointing a gun at a 6-year-old kid, Ian Gonzalez, and crashing in the door in the early morning hours, you know, shades of the Gestapo. And what was their legal precedent? Did they have a court order, as we were supposed to in this republic? No. They had an order signed by Janet Reno, who is an appointed federal official. She's never been elected by anybody.
Well, and we also have the difference between, and I'm not going to get into the whether or not aliens should go back to Cuba or not issue, but I will only say this. I saw a videotape of Ilian before, when he was living in Florida, and I've seen the videotape of him after, when he's with his father, and there's a whole huge difference. A light's turned off in that little boy's eyes, and I can see it, anyone can see it.
Well, I'm like you. I don't think we want to get off on the Ian Gonzalez. The point is, though, is that we, up until recently, we have been operating as a democratic republic.
Yes.
And now we're just operating under federal edict. And
ruled by bureaucracy.
Absolutely. In fact, here's where we are. You live in San Antonio, right?
Yeah.
There is no law that can be passed in San Antonio, Texas, that cannot be superseded by federal statutes, or
That's right.
Or even just orders. Okay. Now we're to the point now to where there is no law that can be passed in the United States that can't be superseded by the World Trade Organization,
which has happened.
Which has already happened in more than 24 cases.
What's so scary about this is that the World Trade Organization is about to be extended into China. And, you know, I had very little sleep last night thinking about this program and thinking about talking about these very subjects. What's so scary is this. The Chinese government in toto looks like the kind of thing that you would have if you had supplanted the democratic processes with an administrative bureaucracy.
Which means they can be blended easily into what they're trying to forge here.
Right. The World Trade Organization has more power than any other governing organization ever in the history of this planet. And nobody, or people are beginning to wake up to this fact, but in fact, it can and does overturn the laws of sovereign nations. We have no vote in who is on the World Trade Organization. We have no say whatsoever, but it can reach down and change our laws, and does so.
And furthermore, there's a lot of people on the courts of the World Trade Organization who not only are not Americans, but basically hate Americans. They don't like us at all.
Even if that wasn't true, the situation remains the same.
That's right.
The power of our vote has been removed by an international bureaucratic organism.
Well, and that's what they're going for. Let me quote to you from Strobe Talbert, which is President Clinton's Deputy Secretary of State. And according to Time magazine in 1992, Strobe Talbert said, "In the next century, meaning today, nations as we know it will be obsolete. All states will recognize a single global authority." And here's the kicker. National sovereignty wasn't such a great idea after all. Hello? This is a guy that's one of the ranking members of our State Department, and he's saying national sovereignty, it wasn't such a great idea after all. Now, that's their view, Whitley. That's their view. Now, my point is that I'm not even here to make any big judgment. I'm a reporter. That's all I am. And it may be that Strobe Talbert's right. Maybe national sovereignty wasn't such a great idea. But my point is, we've never had a chance to vote on this, much less even discuss it in public.
Exactly.
And they've rammed it down our throats. And furthermore, here is the big question. Have you considered this, Whitley? What if they achieve their goals? What if we do get the New World Order and we have one world government, one world army, one world economic system, one world monetary system, and even as some of them have called for, a one world religious system? Okay, now they say that will bring peace and prosperity. But the question is, what is our guarantee that some new Hitler-like tyrant won't gain control over that mechanism?
You know what's so scary the way it's set up now is that we might never know that. We might not be able to tell. Like, for example, we talk about the WTO. Who runs the WTO? Do you know who is actually in power? Who, for example, makes decisions which lead to American laws being waved aside? The answer is you and I don't know, and we can't know because it meets in secret.
That's right. It's all secret. But I do know this, that it's heavily involved with the very secret societies that I write about and rule by secrecy.
Right. Well, let's talk about some of those secret societies and where they came from. Tell me, what are the primary secret societies that we have to deal with here?
Well, of course, we've already been mentioning the World Trade Organization. We all know about the International Monetary Fund, the World Bank. These are the more obvious and modern manifestations. But what you go back to, these very same people are members of one of the more recent societies was the Trilateral Commission, which is, it refers to the trilateral nations of Japan, North America, and Europe. It was founded in 1972 by David Rockefeller and 7 other members of the even more secretive Council on Foreign Relations. And many people believe that the Trilateral Commission was simply a more public version of the Council on Foreign Relations. And then you keep going and you find the Council on Foreign Relations, which has been running our foreign policy. Admittedly, I mean, you know, that's not my theory. I mean, that's even mainstream media would admit that. And they've been running our foreign policy since at least World War II and probably even before. They were founded back in 1921 as an offshoot of the failed and doomed League of Nations of Woodrow Wilson.
Right.
And both of these organizations and a British sister organization called the Royal Institute of International Affairs were all the products of Cecil Rhodes and Alfred Milner of England, and we all know Rhodes for his Rhodes scholarships, which, by the way, Bill Clinton is one of them. And he also, though, left a lot of money to form a secret society called the Round Tables. And the ones we've just mentioned are offshoots of the Round Tables. And then the Round Tables, of course, and Milner and Cecil Rhodes, they were all Illuminized Freemasons.
When you say Illuminized, what do you mean?
I mean that they were Freemasons who had come under the sway of the old Bavarian Illuminati. And let me quickly point out.
Don't be quick. Let's get into the Illuminati now.
Right, but I have to step back a minute, and I want to point out to your listeners that this has nothing to do with the rank and file Freemasons. My father was a Mason. My grandfather was a Mason. Most of the Masons are good, honest, honorable people doing tremendous work, particularly with their burn centers, okay? But even Masonic historians and writers themselves, not one, but many, have admitted that within Freemasonry there are circles within the circles, and that there is an outer circle that does not even know the inner circle exists, and that the inner circle the inner core has traditions and theologies and philosophies that date all the way back through history, and they are under a very strict oath not to reveal that they even exist. So if you ask a Mason, are there these 2 levels, they'll say no, okay? And yet their own people admit that this exists. Now, the Illuminati was a group that was founded by a college professor named Adam Weishaupt back in the mid-1770s, and their whole expressed goal was to overthrow the governments of that time, to overthrow the church and religion of that time, and to form their own New World Order. And
what were their beliefs? How did their beliefs, for example, to overthrow religion? What would they need? What did they believe that they wanted to that they was different from the conventional religion?
Well, they believed in corrupting the youth and breaking up the family unit and to break the back of organized religion.
Why?
Because I think at the root they were secular humanists. They felt like that they were better equipped intellectually to control than the rank and file people out there who were honest, hard-working, church-going people.
So what you're saying is that they shared a sort of a Marxian approach.
That's true. In fact,
religion is the opiate of the people, that kind of thing.
Yeah, you can look at the Illuminati manifesto, and it's almost word for word with the Communist Manifesto. In fact, you find that Karl Marx and the people who founded communism obviously had contact and knowledge of this same philosophy.
When we get back, we're going to be talking a little bit about the profound, deep connection between these ideas and people who are considerable amount of email asking me about my political positions, and I'm not really interested in talking about that too much on the air, but tonight we're talking about conspiracies, and we're talking about conspiracies at a time when both candidates running for the American presidency are exceptionally involved in organizations like the Council on Foreign Relations. So it's fair to ask, are these organizations good or bad?